So apparently I have been spending the last few minutes explaining to my chat what edging is because of, you know, Edge of Eternities. So I lucked out and found out that one of my local card shops actually had both of the precons for Edge of Eternities, and they had them at $35. Now, I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to Magic the Gathering prices lately, but anything under $40 has not exactly been the norm for this game for a little while. So being able to find any deck at all right now at a reasonable price is going to be fantastic for me. Also, I love the fact that the Hearthhull deck that was going for like $100 is now back down to $60. I love the fact that the zombie deck that was at like $47, it's at $47 now, but it was sitting at like $60 or $70 at a lot of card shops I went to. Basically, cards are expensive right now. Sealed product is expensive right now. I'm super happy that I was able to actually find this deck on the cheap, but getting the deck on the cheap does not mean that it is worth playing right out of the box. This one is, but let's go ahead and say that you had $20. If you got $20, you may want to upgrade your precon. So let's go ahead and give ourselves a bit of a framework. Let's look at the precon out of the box, and then let's spend $20 to take 20 cards out of this deck and put 20 new cards into the deck. Alrighty, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have right out of the box. So the commander on the front of the tin for the Landfall deck is Hearthhull the Worldseed, a new spacecraft commander for Magic the Gathering, a new mechanic introduced in this set, with a new set of rules saying that all legendary spacecraft and all legendary vehicles that have a power and toughness can now be your commanders. Hearthhull is a Jund and 1 commander that, if you give it at least 2 power worth of stationing, will let you sacrifice lands to draw cards and then play additional lands. And if you can get it stationed up with 8 power of creatures, then it will become a Flying Vigilance Haster that has the ability of burning your opponents every time you sacrifice a land. Should be noted, the stationing mechanic will take any power of any creatures you tap for the purpose of stationing and add them as charge counters onto Hearthhull. And you can only station as a sorcery, unlike with vehicles, which can be done at instant speed. This deck also comes with a bunch of secondary commanders, some of the most in any other deck we've ever gotten. The primary secondary commander for the deck is Szarel, the Genesis Shepherd. It's an ancient Green Warden that has the ability to distribute 1/1 counters onto other things. Lets you play things from the graveyard, and that's really powerful for this deck's strategy. But there are 2 other secondary commanders in this deck. The precon comes with Soul of Windgrace. On this channel, we also just like to call him Landcat, because I made a bunch of Landcat decks, and I absolutely adore Landcat. He allows us to generate lands whenever he enters or attacks. He can discard lands to draw us cards, gain us life, and do all kinds of nastiness. But we do have one other alternative commander this deck could have in the front, and that is Corvold, the Fey Cursed King. I do not understand why Corvold, of all creatures, has made his way into this deck, but we do have him now. Corvold, Fey Cursed King. His price is going to keep dropping because he is now in another precon, and he allows us to draw cards every time we sacrifice permanents. He also gives us the ability to sack a permanent every time he enters the battlefield or attacks. So this begs the question, which commander are we going to actually use to be our commander for the deck? And I'm going to be honest, I think I'm going to make it Hearthhull. And the reason I'm going to make it Hearthhull is because, in my estimation, I want to play the new, fun, interesting toy. And the station mechanic gives us something that I really like. And I got to play this deck a bunch at my local card shop over the weekend. And there's a strategy with Hearthhull that I have been leaning into that I adore. And it's stationing it up to 6 or 7 charge counters, but never letting it quite hit the point where it becomes a creature. You see, when your stationed spacecraft become a creature, they become far more susceptible to damage. Regular old board wipes, like the ones included in this deck, like Blasphemous Act and Planetary Annihilation, can now hit these cards. Regular old removal spells will be able to hit these cards now. And for every Beast Within that exists in somebody's deck, they also have a handful of cards like Infernal Grasp, which can only kill creatures. Hell, if you're fighting a white deck, you probably have a ton of times where a Swords to Plowshare or a Path to Exile has hit you directly. And remember, those cards can only hit creatures. So what I like to do with Hearthhull is hold him in artifact mode for as long as humanly possible and not actually station him all the way until we hit the point where I think it is absolutely necessary in order to close out the game. So, since we are going to be sticking with Hearthhull, let's see what the deck itself as it exists tries to accomplish. The current version of the deck has a few different strategies, and they all rely on either lands entering the battlefield, lands leaving the battlefield, or permanents being sacrificed in general. Now, this means that the deck is gonna have one strategy based on getting big creatures out, where they do things with your land manipulation, and then we're going to have a tokens strategy as well, which is a pretty primary win condition for a lot of decks that are in the landfall subtype. But this means that our deck is split between these two ideas, and we need to give it an identity in exactly one of them. So some of these cards are gonna be cut, though I am happy with some of the inclusions in here. I don't hate cards like Multani. I really like Mazariek, Kral Death Priest. I've seen other people play him at my LGS, and the extra combats from Morog are really cool if we are focusing on combat. The draw engine in this deck is also fantastic. I mentioned Korvold is in here, but we also have Gitrog Monster. Gitrog Monster is a fantastic card that allows you to draw cards as you shove them into your graveyard, and also allows you additional lands on top of that. And a play that I have been enjoying is getting a lot of tokens on the board and then just summoning God Eternal Bantu, sacrificing all your tokens, drawing half your deck, and then staring at your opponents, asking them what their plan is to deal with you, because they just do not have the ability to do it anymore. Unfortunately, there are some things in this deck that I don't think need to stick around. I don't really like the Sprouting Goblin in here. It allows you, if you kick it, to get a land from your deck into your hand, which is just not what I want to do in Landfall. I want those lands to touch the battlefield, and he allows us to sack lands to draw cards, but this effectively just makes him a smaller, weaker, and far worse version of our commander. We also have Night's Whisper in here, which is an okay draw spell, but the only person I know of that enjoys this card a ton is Dana Roach, and I'm not Dana. I'm not at all. I'm sorry. I think Night's Whisper is an okay card in spell singing strategies, but I think when we have a commander that has the ability to draw 2 cards in his own right for 1 mana, I would rather not run cards that have a superfluous and weaker version of that ability that I cannot exploit as much. It doesn't make it a bad card, it just makes it not a card that I want to run in here. Looking at the ramp section for this version of the deck, though, there is something that sticks out to me as a little bit weird. And it's the fact that we've got an Arcane Signet and a Soul Ring in here. Now, obviously, Soul Ring's going to be in damn near every deck. We've only had one Precon that has been printed that did not include a Soul Ring, but the Signet feels a little strange to me. In a strategy that is built entirely around the idea of landfall and land sacrifice, the Signet just feels out of place. And the only players that I've ever talked to that seem like they are gung-ho on Arcane Signet being in every single deck are CEDH players who absolutely need every ounce of speed they can eke out of their game. That's just not what we're here for in a regular game of casual Commander. I also like Horizon Explorer a lot, but maybe not for this deck. I think Taval really likes him a lot, but not in here. I do like that this version of the deck not only has a really strong draw package, though, but has a bunch of removal. 3 board wipes and 11 methods of interaction, even if some of them are not the most powerful forms of interaction, like Mayhem Devil. These are still good to see, and it means that new players picking up this deck are going to be able to deal with a variety of situations with a variety of cards, and they'll be able to pick their favorites. Are they the type of player that really likes low-cost interaction? Then they are going to be leaning more into cards like the Infernal Grasp and the Terra Sunder and the Rakdos Charm. Are you somebody that likes having a switch, an omni switch tool in your pocket to deal with all situations, or cards that can do tons of different things? Then you're probably going to end up leaning into cards like Binding the Old Gods and Beast Within and Windgrace's Judgment, as they can kill any number of just tons of permanents on the board. And if you tend to be a person that likes big, explosive Timmy-style strategies, then that World Soul's Rage and that Pest Infestation and that World Breaker are there to fill that role. A lot of these are not going to make the final cut as you upgrade the deck, but I like that the deck does give you all these different versions of removal spells to give you a bunch of paths to play with. But then we got to move to the basic land section. And I'm not 100% sold on this waste being here, but it is here, and the deck is running 10 fetching lands. At 10 fetching lands, we should be able to get all the land sacrifice and landfall triggers we ever could possibly want, and I want to go ahead and point out the absolute madness that is having a Fabled Passage in the land section here. Fabled Passage being in a precon is way more huge than I think anybody truly realizes. This is the first time a true blue untapped entering fetch land has made its way into a precon where beginners are able to just get that into their hands and play with fetch land levels of speed, power, and just land sequencing. I love that it's in here. I want to see more of this going forward. And speaking of stuff that I want to see more of going forward, take a look at the rest of this land base. It's kind of nutty, right? So we've got pain lands in here, good filters, bad filters, Odyssey filters, not bad filters. And then we not only have the bicycle lands, the new ones, the Festering Thicket, we also have the new lands that are always come into play untapped if you've got your regular basic lands out. These are also called Tango lands because it takes 2 to tango, and it takes 2 basic lands to let these come into play untapped. This means this precon only comes in the Golgari section with 1 type of tapped land, and that land can be ignored by cycling it to the graveyard. This is a deck that contains 42 lands. You are able to cycle away these if you get too many lands, and this is a theme shared across all the other colors. The Gruul lands have the Pain land, the Bicycle land, and the Tango land, and when you get to the Rakdos lands, again, we have the Pain land, the Bicycle land, and we have the Tango land. This means that every land in this deck either comes into play untapped or can be searchable with a fetch land. And this deck does come with cards like Rocky Tar Pit, which are fetch lands that can grab typed lands out of the deck. And the deck does contain ways to make sure that these come into play untapped as well. And as for utility lands, it's got Bajuka Bog, which everybody should be having in their black deck, and the Immedium Hatchery, which will give you some tokens for sacrificing the land and comes into play untapped. There's all kinds of stuff to love in this deck, but we do have the task of turning this into something a little more potent. So let's see what has to get cut out of the deck to make room for some better pieces. So how do we evaluate what cards need to come out of the original version of the deck? Well, the first thing I want to look at is going to be the mana curve of the original deck. And this is a nice mana curve, but these big splashy spells at the end and just having a giant spell with a mana value of 9, some of these things feel a little bit agitating to me to try to work with. The reason behind that, as far as I'm concerned, is that I think that decks perform better when they run cheaper cards. I think when you run the bigger, splashier cards, you might have a little bit more fun whenever they can succeed, but generally speaking, you're gonna have games that don't feel as good to play because you're gonna have those cards sitting in your hand, unable to be used. That said, this curve is still good on its own, so let's try to keep as close to this curve as we can as we upgrade the deck. The new curve that we're going to be looking at is going to be looking a little more like this, focusing more on our 3-mana drop spells as they all come down right before the commander, and cutting away some of the bigger spells in general. The average mana value of the deck ends up being about the same across the two, but I think this still will smooth up our games. As for the cards that we plan on removing from the deck, I'm going to be truncating the entire big creature section of the deck. I don't think this deck needs to be relying on combat, so we're going to be removing Urg Spawn of Turg, Mazriek, Morog, Multani, Centaur Vinecrasher, and Jury, all for the same reason. Now, Jury does not necessarily need to be a combat creature, but Jury does suffer from a huge oversight with a deck like this. we don't have any reliable way of getting rid of Jury, and we don't have a fast enough way to build Jury up. So I just don't think the Jury needs to stay in. For our draw package, Braids is a bit too slow. I've already given you my problems with Knight's Whisper, and I've already given you my problems with Sprouting Goblin. They all just do not feel like they do enough for what the deck is trying to do. For the ramp section, I think Arcane Signet needs to leave because it's just not doing a lot here. Yeah, it's one of the best rocks in the game, but we're a landfall deck. I don't think we actually need rocks. Horizon Explorer, I think, works best in a combat-focused land deck, and as we're cutting out all the methods of combat, then Horizon Explorer doesn't really belong in here either. And then there's Soul Ring. Is Soul Ring a good card? Yes. Is Soul Ring the best mana rock in the game? For the most part, absolutely. Do I like Soul Ring, and do I like the way that it makes games feel for everybody? No, not really. Think about the amount of games that you've played where a Soul Ring has improved it. Not made your gameplay better, not made the game better for an opponent, but your play experience at that table was legitimately improved by somebody playing a Soul Ring. I'm going to go ahead and venture a guess that more than likely the Soul Ring led to somebody getting out far ahead or getting bullied out of the game early because they just had that bit of speed. I'm just going to assume one of those things happened because that's what happens every time I see it played at my tables. I don't think it actually improves our gameplay experiences, and we are here to improve gameplay experiences, so I'm cutting it out. As for recursion, I think the Lone Crafter Fawn does not do enough here, and I don't think the Groundskeeper does enough here either. Returning basic lands from our graveyard to our hand for 2 mana feels like a bit of a stretch in a deck that does not want to be spending that mana in the first place. And for removal, World Breaker, again, we're spending too much mana to make this work. For our tokens, I don't think Formless Genesis needs to be in here because, again, we are going to be spending too much mana to make that card work. Then, for the lands of the deck, I do not think we need to be running the Darkmoor Salvage. It's a great dredge land, but we are not a dredge deck. And for our fetching lands, I have never been a fan of the Rocky Tar Pit or the Mountain Valley. Both of these cards enter tapped and only really function if we have a way to make them enter untapped. Save these lands for Wandering Minstrel decks that have a guaranteed way to let lands enter untapped. I would not be running them in other decks. They are just far too slow. And Myriad Landscape, I adore, but I don't think it can actually fit in this deck. And my reasoning is thus. Not only is it a slow land like the Mountain Valley, like the Rocky Tar Pit, but in my experience while playing this deck, I have found that I run out of basic lands very, very quickly. So lands that yank 2 basic lands out of the deck feel like they would be perfect. But if this card came into play untapped, I might be willing to give it a pass. It does not come into play untapped, and because it only grabs 2 basic lands of the same type, and it has to grab basic lands, I'd rather swap it out for some quicker, punchier lands that do less, but do not exhaust my supply of resources as fast. Again, this is just based off of a bunch of testing I've done over the weekend. That all said, that's everything that's being cut out of the deck. What are we going to be adding in to replace those cards? We got $20 to spend. Let's see what we can do. So as we're upgrading this deck, let's take a look at what's in the deck to give us kind of a guiding post for what needs to be added in. So the deck itself came with this thing. This is Scouring Swarm, a creature that every time you sacrifice a land can make a token copy of itself, so long as we have enough lands in the graveyard. This is a retooling of the previously released Scoot Swarm, which is a far faster, far punchier, and far more powerful version of this effect. It lacks flying, but it has the ability to get way more out of hand way faster. At only $2 or $2.50, I think it's a reasonable include. The other version of it's already in the deck, and the deck already came with Rampaging Baloths and Baloth Prime, so why not make sure that the Scouring Swarm has its brother in here as well? Also, this is a deck that can become a very, very quick archenemy deck once you get the commander online. So let's make sure that the first major upgrade after the Scoot Swarm is Pull Through the Weft. This card from the main set allows us to not only get 2 cards from our graveyard to our hand, but it also allows us to get 2 lands from our graveyard onto the battlefield. 4 cards of advantage for 5 mana is really, really good, but since we can guarantee those lands hitting the graveyard all the time, I think this is fantastic. The only thing we need now is a guaranteed way to get non-land cards into our grave, as we are not sacrificing a lot of other non-land cards. But I have a way to do that. Let's go ahead and look at the draw section. I'm going to be adding in a Mazzolanti the Great Door to the deck. For under $1, this is a card that lets you draw and discard cards, and if we transform it, it can turn into the Core. For every single permanent card in our graveyard, this will add us 1 mana. This directly circumvents the downside of our commander. Our commander sacrifices a lot of lands, but if this is tapping for 1 extra mana for every land that goes to the graveyard, we're never actually losing that mana. We're just losing raw cardboard. But raw cardboard means nothing if the actual values it represents stay exactly the same. Let's also add in To Memorial Ensign. I want to lean more into the burn and token aspects of this deck. Go ahead and say it's because I play too much Aristocrats. I would probably agree with you, but To Memorable Ensign allows us to burn people for 1 damage every time a land touches our battlefield, and if it's the second time this happens, we get to draw a card. To is a fantastic include in this deck, giving us access to draw and burn, respectively. I want to go ahead and upgrade the removal package of the deck a bit as well. 11 cards is fine. We went down to 10 after we cut one of those Eldrazi, but let's add a Death Sprout into here too. This is one of the reasons that I think the deck runs out of basic lands as often as it does. I've added in more ways to get basics out, and so Death Sprout is one of those ways. Blowing up a creature and then immediately going into your deck and getting a basic land triggers landfall on your opponent's turns, and there's some interesting implications to that. Somebody can be swinging out to you, and you can Death Sprout one of the people swinging, and then make sure that the land coming into play spawns a token that can also block. There's some fun combat-y tricks you can do with instant speed cards that yank lands out of your deck. Speaking of instant speed cards, let's add an Emerald Charm to the deck. This card can not only make a creature lose flying, making it easier for our stuff to reach it, but its 2 other modes are fucking fantastic. Blowing up any enchantment on the board that isn't an aura means we can get rid of things like Omniscience. We can get rid of cards that like Extravagant Replication, that have the ability to spiral the game out of control. Double Vision, Storm of Saruman is another one as well. Like, think of broken enchantments. We can use this to get rid of them, but we can also use this to untap any permanent. This means that what we can do with this is tap our commander to get an additional land and sack a land, and then immediately untap our commander and then do it again, drawing us 4 cards and allowing us 2 additional land drops and 2 additional land sacrifices. That is insane, but to support a strategy like that, we need to beef up our landfall strategy and beef up our ways to get cards into the field from the graveyard. So let's upgrade our land synergies package with a Perennial Behemoth and a Ramanup Excavator. Both of these will allow us to play land cards from our grave, and since the alternative commander for the deck already gave us ways to play lands from our grave, this is just expanding on what the deck is already doing. This is what happens when you take a deck from bracket 2 to bracket 3, by the way. You are cutting out superfluous extra strategies, and you are adding in focus on a singular strategy. Now, let's make sure that our land synergies are beefed up even more with Retreat to Hagra and Valakut Exploration. Exploration allows us to burn everybody and also get Impulse Draw, depending on which cards we see off the top. I can see a lot of situations where having a board with Valakut Exploration, Retreat to Hagra, and Tanakh just burns people to death super quick. And you know what? Let's add in one way to win with combat. Why not? Let's put in an Avenger of Zendikar. We have this along with our Scoot Swarm. What I have found Avenger of Zendikar to be best at is creating a scenario where everybody feels like they are safe. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in every game where I've played Avenger of Zendikar, if I did not win the game outright with the Avenger, then an opponent kills the Avenger or all the bugs or any scenario. It forces people's hands, forces their removal to be used, and then people feel safe. Once the big threat has been dealt with, you are no longer the threat, and people start pivoting their attention away from you. Avenger of Zendikar becomes a very fun psychological piece then, depending on the makeup of your pod. Playing it down when you know you don't need it to win, but you just want it to absorb removal so that other cards that are more important to your strategy do not get removed. Hell, play it down right before flipping your commander into his final form so that you don't have to worry about a single creature removal being aimed at your commander. But that also may mean that you end up taking a board wipe far faster, so just be careful. That said, let's also upgrade the lands in this deck, and I want to make sure that they happen last, so we're not going to be doing them just yet. We need to upgrade the ramp section first. So What are we going to be using for that? Well, Tireless Provisioner allows us to get treasures out of lands, which can let us get very far accelerated ahead. Then we have Entish Restoration, which is just another Harrow or Roiling Regrowth that's already in the deck. But if our commander is turned online, this gets 3 lands out of the deck instead of 2, which makes it that much better. Finally, let's add in an extra piece of removal with Decimate. This allows us to destroy an artifact, creature, enchantment, and a land, making sure that we can get rid of all the most problematic cards on the board at once. Then we can talk about the lands being added to this deck. I think for the fetch lands we removed, we need to add in a Demolition Field. It has a similar fetching ability for us, but it can also get rid of problematic lands on our opponent's board. Let's also add in a Twisted Landscape, as this allows us to search our library for any of the basic lands we need. It allows us to cycle. Basically, we can do whatever we want with this landscape. It's just fantastic. It's better than an Evolving Wilds in our deck, and I don't know why it wasn't included in the deck itself, but it's only 17 cents. You can find a copy of it. Let's also add in some MDFCs. Revitalizing Repath is a land that allows us to protect our important permanents. Hagra Mauling is a removal spell that allows us to have access to a land when need be. Disciple of Freylease can sacrifice any of our tokens to draw us lots of cards and gain us life. And for the spicy one, I think every single deck with this commander should be running a Mount Doom, a pain land that allows us to burn every opponent, which is neat, but we can use it to sacrifice a legendary artifact, and then we get to choose 2 creatures on the board and keep them protected. After that, we destroy every other creature on the board. Now, normally this is a very hard card to make work, but our commander happens to be a legendary artifact, so Mount Doom is always online 100% of the time, so long as our commander's out. And given that we have the ability to play lands from our graveyard, the easiest thing in the world is ripping the board apart with Mount Doom, and then playing Mount Doom again as your additional land, and then looking at your opponents and going, hey buddy, hey, how's it going? I like playing Magic the Gathering, but I want to play all the Magic, and I would like you to have a limited amount of Magic you're allowed to play. And that's what Mount Doom allows you to do. I think if there's any card you add to this deck, Mount Doom is probably one of the single strongest ones you can add in. A board wipe attached to your land that allows you to get out of several dangerous situations is just far too important to ignore. That all said, there's one other thing I would probably do as I'm upgrading this deck. I would get rid of almost every land that cannot be searched directly out of the deck and replace them with basic lands. In my experience, when playing Landfall, I have regretted every single time that I have tried to add lands in a deck that could not be tutored up with basically every other land searching card, because you run out of resources far too easily, let me tell you. All right, looking at this opening hand, it's a bit slow, and I'm not super thrilled about that, but we have Tanuk and a Valakut Restoration, so we actually have some pretty decent cards to open up with. I'm willing to risk this hand, actually. So let's go ahead and draw. That's a swamp. We'll play Twisted Landscape. We'll go ahead and sack it, and we will go... Actually, no, we don't do that. We need Tanuk. We don't have green. We have to do that. Go into our library, we get a forest, we drop it down, pop. All right, and then we move into the next turn. Turn 2, we have a Disciple of Freylease. We don't have a 2-mana spell. I'm kind of willing to play Hagra Mauling as our face-down card, because we at least get its tapped ability out of the way. Willing to. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I'm willing to do it. And then we have to move on to the next turn. Turn 3, we have Demolition Field available. Let's go ahead and play Mount Doom, and then let's get Tanuk out. That way, when we go to our next turn, we get to play the Swamp. Tap 1, 2, 3, 4. Get the commander out, and let's give him his charge counters. Actually, that's the wrong move. That's the wrong move. The commander doesn't have to come out yet. Commander doesn't have to come out yet. We can play Bramaduk Excavator, playing the Twisted Landscape, dealing 1 damage to everybody, sacking the Twisted Landscape, going into the library, getting a new swamp, shuffling it, and then drawing a card. That's the correct move. Because when we go to the next turn, we can tap all of these, get the commander out, tap Tanook, tap this, add the extra counters to our commander, and then we can play the Twisted Landscape from the grave, tap the commander to crack the Twisted Landscape in order to draw 2 cards, and then play the Twisted Landscape as our additional card, burning everybody, drawing 1 more additional card, and then sacking the Twisted Landscape to go into our library and grab ourselves yet another swamp. And then, looking at what we have right here, we need to keep the Tireless Tracker because he's really good draw. Actually, you know, we don't need him. We don't need him, we don't need the mountain, and we don't need the swamp. We don't need the Terramorphic Expanse. Yeah, we don't. Not right now. So we'll keep it like that. That's fine. Moving into the next turn, we are at turn 6. Ooh, we have Gitrog Monster. That could be really good. That could be really good. We could... Do we do Gitrog Monster or Baloth Prime? Gitrog Monster gives us more card draw. We get to see more cardboard. I like seeing more cardboard. Seeing more cardboard is fantastic. But at the same time, it'd be really funny. You know what? Actually, no. Let's burn people to death. Let's do that. Let's burn people to death. We're going to play Valakut Restoration. Ramming Up is going to allow us to play Terramorphic Expanse from the grave, and then sacrifice the Terramorphic Expanse to go into the library and get a forest. That was the, see, first land entered. That would exile a card. Second land entered. I'm doing this out of order, unfortunately, because I'm forgetting triggers, but that's just me. Exile the top card, and then another one happened, exile the top card, and then Tanook happens, so we get to draw a card. Then we pay 1, tap the commander, sacrifice this swamp to draw 2 cards, allowing us to play an additional land. I would like to play this Fabled Passage, which allows us to exile the top card again, which burns everybody for 1. By the way, before we do this, we're going to say that I crewed the commander beforehand, like I'm not an idiot. So we would have burned people for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, we've burned people for 12 so far with this, by doing this way. Crack the Fabled Passage, going into the library, and grabbing a forest, which exiles the top. So Valakut's responsible for burning people for 4. Tanook is responsible for burning people for 4. And Hearthhull is responsible for burning people for 4. And then we can use Tear Asunder to remove a problematic card from the board. And then as we end our turn, we can sack this forest and pass as we go. These cards all go to our graveyard. And we immediately get to laugh at our opponents because they have burned for 12 damage. They're not going to let us live very long, but I'm willing to play around with their emotions a bit. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's get Gitrog Monster out. This allows us an additional land, and anytime we sacrifice a land, we get to draw a card. Ram It Up says we can play a land from our grave. So let's go into our grave. View all. I would like this Twisted Landscape. I want to crack this Twisted Landscape to use Hearthhull. So we played the Twisted Landscape. It gives us the Windgrace's Judgment. We're going to be burning people for 2 at the end of the turn. Twisted Landscape comes out. We're sacrificing with our commander, drawing 1, 2, 3 cards. That burns people for 2 more. That means we get to play 2 additional lands. We have a Pull Through the Weft. That's a really good card we can use here in a minute. I wish I could ramp a bit higher. Do we have a Harrow? We don't have a Harrow. Unfortunate. Oh, well. We play the Twisted Landscape, exiling the top. Burning our opponents for 2. Sack the Twisted Landscape, drawing a card, getting a land out of the deck. Burning our opponents for 1, 2, 3, 4. And then playing the Twisted Landscape, burning our opponents for 2 by exiling the top. and then cracking the Twisted Landscape, burning our opponents for 1-2 because of our commander, and then 2 more because we're going to be exiling the top. Again, I know I'm doing this out of order, just trying to make it easier to do the triggers for the video itself. It's Schrodinger's deck. Until we know which cards are in our hands, we're just kind of fine. There we are. So we have a hand of 11 cards, and our opponents have taken 28 damage, and we only started doing damage last turn. And, oh, I missed a draw from Tanook. Sorry. We have 12 cards in our hand. We have a Corvold in our hand. We can do all kinds of shit. We can do all kinds of wacky shit. But here's what the last thing we're going to be doing is. We're going to discard down. We have a Mount Doom, and we want to hold on to Revitalizing Repast. Everything else is kind of superfluous. I don't need the Rampaging Baloths. I don't need the Baloth Prime now. I don't need the Titania. We have the Scoot Swarm. That's the only one we really need. We have a board wipe. We have multiple ways to remove things from the board. I think that the Decimate is more important than the Beast Within right now. And I think the Disciple of Freylease is not super important for our strategy right now either. So, let's say that we go to the final turn for lulls. There's a Blast Act. We don't even need to worry about that. We have a Mount Doom on the board. We have 3 board wipes available to us. But what I want to do is just see what kind of damage we can shit out right now. Fuck it. Play land from grave. I would like to play Twisted Landscape. Once again, showing why this card is as good as it is. It is versatile as hell. Tap Twisted Landscape, use the commander. You had to exile the top card of the deck. BT dubs. So we exile the top from the first landfall. Twisted Landscape does its thing. It exiles. There's there. We are using our commander. We are cracking it to draw 1, 2, 3 cards. And then we get to play our additional land, which is going to be the Twisted Landscape. Cracking it, burned them for 2. We burned them for 2 from the Tanook. We burned them for 2 more because of the Valakut. Exiling Binding the Old Gods. We just... Oh, we have Emerald Charm. Fuck it. Emerald Charm. Let's untap our commander and tap it again. That means we have a 4th additional land we can use. 2 more draws. 1 more draw from Tanook that I completely forgot. Burning our opponents for 2 more, and then 2 more from Valakut and Tanook. Because we're not going to be using any of these cards in the grave. Sacrificing the Twisted Landscape, drawing us a card from the Gitrog monster, and then burning our opponents for 2. There we go. It's turn 8. We've done 120 damage to the entire table, and we're not done with our turn, and we still have 15 cards in our hand. We still have the ability to Planetary Annihilation to get rid of everybody's board state, including ours, honestly. But it also sacrifices a bunch of lands, which our commander will see. We can play Corvold. We can play Scoot Swarm. We still have 2 extra landfall triggers we can do, because Pull Through the Weft grabs 2 lands and takes them out of the graveyard and puts them onto the board. We used the Emerald Charm to untap our commander already. Like, we're honestly in a really good spot. I don't hate where we are right now. So, there we are. Deck does plenty. Deck does lots of damage. I'm happy with it. Let's go into conclusions. All in all, I think Hearthhull is a fun deck in his own right, but I also think, more importantly, he gives a little bit of legitimacy to the new rule about the station mechanic. I like having access to these spacecraft as commanders. My only concern, like with almost every set that comes out these days, is that this is a mechanic that is not going to be reutilized for years. We're going to have a handful of these now, and it's just going to be saying, hey, guess what? Here's this cool new mechanic you can look at and be happy about for one set. You know, we used to have a solution to this problem. It was called block sets. We had blocks, and those blocks explored a myriad of different mechanics over the course of an entire year. But we don't have that anymore. We have single independent sets that just kind of do their thing. So it just is what it is, I suppose. That all said, I do hope you guys enjoyed this deck upgrade. I love this deck. It's fun out of the box, but I think it's just not trying to be a combat deck, so I just wanted to cut all that shit out, and it can do combat if you need it to. That's what Scoot Swarm is for. It's got plenty of ability to punch people in the nose, but we've left in only the best ways to punch people in the nose. We don't need a lot of singular creatures that they themselves can punch hard. We need the tokens so that we can have a board state that goes wide and is harder to deal with. People run more instant speed removal than they run board wipes in Magic the Gathering. I think it's a good idea to lean into that. That all said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this deck upgrade. I enjoyed playing it. It was a lot of fun, and honestly, I wish we could have seen more of the cards that I had thrown into the deck in the final run, but I'm glad we were able to see Tanook do his thing. I'm glad Emerald Charm gave us a little bit of extension. That was fun. I'm glad Valakut Exploration gave us more burn, and the Ramadup Excavator just did his job really, really well. So I'm thrilled with where we're at. Oh, that Twisted Landscape also did a lot of work. That was good too. If you guys enjoyed this video, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full-time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Limor Pinku, Love Bunny Games, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Aurora, Leela Uraraka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press, though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.